a quiet town nestled in the Canadian Rockies, known for its art, its history, and its sense of safety. But that spring night, tragedy struck, a crime so devastating, so senseless, that it changed the community forever. 19-year-old Aimee Beaulieu, a young mother too, was found dead in her trailer home. She had been strangled, murdered in cold blood. Just hours later, flames engulfed that trailer, killing her 11-month-old twins, David and Samantha, in what investigators believe was a calculated attempt to cover up her murder. Over 30 years later, no one has been arrested, no trial, no justice. And yet, her name lives on, not just in newspaper clippings or dusty case files, but in a transition house that helped thousands of women escape domestic abuse. This is a story of Aimee Beaulieu and the lives that were taken, and the ones still searching for answers. Before she became a headline, Aimee Beaulieu was a daughter, a sister, and a young mother. Born in 1972, she grew up in British Columbia, a sensitive, funny, and vibrant young woman. Friends remember her as loving and deeply devoted to her two children, David and Samantha, twins who had just begun walking, babbling, and discovering the world around them. At 19, Aimee was trying to rebuild her life. She had recently left an abusive relationship in Summerland, a quiet but significant act of bravery, and moved back to Nelson to be near her mother. They lived in adjacent trailers in a modest trailer park on the outskirts of town. By all accounts, Aimee was doing her best. She was enrolling in job training. She wanted to create a stable home. Most of all, she wanted her twins to grow up safe. But someone had other plans. The evening of April 1st was quiet. There were no signs of struggle, no calls to police, no frantic messages to friends. But sometime between midnight and the early morning hours of April 2nd, everything changed. Around 2:30 a.m., Constables Fred Mansville and Warren Weber were patrolling nearby when they spotted thick smoke rising from the trailer park. The trailer, Aimee's trailer, was engulfed in flames. The officers rushed to the scene, desperate to save anyone inside. They kicked in the door. Smoke and heat poured out. They found Aimee's body on the floor. She had not died from the fire. She had been dead before it started. Autopsy later confirmed the cause of death: strangulation. Somewhere in the smoke, the twins were crying, but it was already too late. By the time firefighters could reach them, 11-month-old David and Samantha had succumbed to the heat and smoke. They died only feet away from their mother, in the place that was supposed to keep them safe. The fire was not accidental. That much became clear quickly. It had been set deliberately. Investigators believe it was meant to destroy evidence. But whoever said it didn't anticipate that two babies would also die inside. Nelson RCMP immediately opened a homicide investigation. But leads were thin. There were no signs of forced entry. No murder weapon left behind. No neighbors heard screaming. And in a cruel twist, the fire had damaged or destroyed much of the physical evidence. But one detail investigators could not ignore. Aimee had just left an abusive relationship. Although police have never publicly named the suspect, many believe Aimee's former partner was a prime person of interest. He had a history of violence. Multiple witnesses say Aimee feared him. In fact, her return to Nelson was not just about being closer to family. It was about escape. Her mother, who lived next door, told officers she believed Aimee's ex-boyfriend was capable of harming her. But in 1992, domestic violence was still largely considered a private matter. Police lacked the tools, and sometimes the will, to intervene preemptively. There were no charges filed, no protective orders, no arrests, and soon the trail began to go cold. For those who responded, the memory of that night has never faded. Constable Fred Mansveld later reflected on it in a 2022 interview. You never forget the smell, or the silence afterward. We wanted to believe we could have done something more, but we were too late. Fire crews described it as one of the most emotionally devastating calls they'd ever worked. One firefighter was reportedly hospitalized for smoke inhalation, sustained trying to reach the children. The community was shattered. Hundreds attended the memorial service. Tiny white caskets. A photo of Aimee with her babies, smiling in the sunshine, place at the front. A moment of silence spread across the town. But silence would become a theme in this case, both in the lack of answers and in the voices unwilling to speak up. In the weeks following the fire, RCMP conducted dozens of interviews. They reviewed Aimee's phone records. Her ex-boyfriend was questioned, but without evidence, nothing could stick. No forensic link was found. The fire had done its job too well. And even though many believed they knew who was responsible, no one had the proof. One neighbor said, asterisk, everyone had suspicions, but there's a difference between suspicion and a conviction. And without something concrete, the police were stuck. Asterisk, over time, the case slipped from the front page to the back. In 1995, 3 years after the murder, Aimee's family and local advocates founded the Aimee Beaulieu Transition House in Nelson. The facility provides shelter and support for women fleeing abuse. To date, it has helped thousands of women and children find safety. Aimee's mother was instrumental in its creation. She once said, "I couldn't save my daughter, but maybe this house will save someone else's." Her words resonate to this day. Inside the transition house, a small plaque hangs near the entrance. In memory of Aimee, David, and Samantha, you are not forgotten. 3 decades later, Aimee's case remains officially unsolved, but it's not forgotten. Nelson RCMP has kept the file open. In 2022, on the 30th anniversary, a spokesperson told the Castlegar News, "We are still asking anyone with information to come forward. Time does not erase truth. There are rumors the case was quietly reopened in 2018 after new interviews, but nothing has been publicly confirmed. What's clear is this. Someone out there knows what happened that night. Maybe they were too afraid to speak in 1992. Maybe they still are, but the time for silence has long passed." At the heart of this case lies a brutal contrast. A young woman trying to start over, 2 infants barely learning to walk, and the violence that stole everything. David and Samantha never got to say their first words, never saw a birthday beyond their first. Aimee never got to become the woman she was trying to be, never saw justice, and the person responsible, or people, walked away. There's no courtroom verdict in this case, no conviction, but the verdict of the community is clear. This was a case of domestic violence turned fatal. And in the words of one local advocate, asterisk, we lost 3 lives that night, not to a random act, but the predictable outcome of unchecked abuse. Asterisk, this case helped change how Nelson handles domestic violence. Police response improved. Shelters expanded. Awareness campaigns launched. But the cause came far too late for Aimee and her children. If you've stayed with us this far, you may be wondering, is there any hope? Investigators believe there still is. Advances in forensic technology, digital records, and public awareness have solved cases far older than this. Cold case units across Canada are now re-examining unsolved domestic homicides from the 80s and 90s, and the RCMP is listening. If you or someone you know has information about Aimee Beaulieu's murder or the fire that killed her children, you are urged to contact the Nelson RCMP or Crime Stoppers. You can remain anonymous, because even after 30 years, justice is still possible. And 3 names, Aimee, David, and Samantha, still deserve answers. This has been the story of Aimee Beaulieu, a young mother who tried to escape abuse, 2 babies who never had a chance, and a crime that has gone unpunished for over 30 years. Their lives were short, but their memory endures. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if the story moved you, and consider supporting local women's shelters in Aimee's name, because the silence protects no one,